Hey guys, today we're going to make a track in the style of Deftones and it's going to sound like this. Alright, so that's what we're going to create, and we're going to dive into all the Deftones production tricks, from the drum sound and Abe's unique playing style to the unconventional bass lines, Stefan's huge epic guitar riffs, Frank's awesome sound design. We're covering all of it today. I'm going to try to write something that captures everything we love about Deftones, from the classic albums to the newer albums and everything in between. So let's jump in, and I want to start with some clean atmospheric guitars. So to start off, we just want a great sounding clean amp, so I'm going to use the clean amp in archetype Nolly. And we have the bass and mids quite low and the treble high, so it's really got that clarity. And let's just go up here and turn on the delay. Go for like a quarter note, turn the mix up, see if we can get that sex tape sound. There we go. Delay is the key. Okay, so let's try writing something with this, and I'm thinking like Deftones, so I want to keep it minimal, so maybe a couple of suspended chords or something. 130 beats per minute, let's try it. That's cool, let's try that. Okay, and let's loop that a few times so we have like an intro with just guitar and then we'll have a verse. Okay, so we're actually going to go with major here. This is a ninth from the root and then major third, then up to the major sixth. So Deftones uses major way more than most heavy bands. We just need to keep in mind as we build this track that we want to keep it kind of on the darker side of major. It doesn't want to sound too happy, but I'll show you some tricks later for achieving that kind of sound. For now, let's build the verse from this, and usually I would track something like this on the left and the right. I've got this on the left right now. And because it's Deftones, we're going to be minimalists and leave the space in the mix to put some other things on the right. So we're going to leave it like that. So the first thing I want to put on the right is this sound that I've called Haunting Synth, which is a Vital sound I've put together. So this is inspired by those ethereal haunting synths we hear all through Deftones' catalog. So we have some sine waves and modulation going on. I'll talk more about that in a bit. And you can also see I'm blending in some white noise here. So if I turn these off, so I know that might seem a bit weird to blend some noise in with the synth sound, but in Deftones music, there's always like this distant wind, you know what I mean? That like atmosphere. And I find that blending some white noise into all of my synth sounds always actually gives my music more of a Deftones vibe. So that is actually quite an important trick. Other than that, we just have a bunch of like delay, reverb, the kind of stuff you would expect. And again, I'm just sprinkling in a couple of notes. We don't want a keyboard solo here. We want to keep it minimal, keep it atmospheric. So we'll use those first 8 bars as like an atmospheric intro. And then here, when it kicks in, let's bring in some drums. So for this, I'm using the Modern and Massive 2 kit by GGD because it has the Deftones snare. And I do have a bunch of processing on this snare. So I've got this EQ here. I've got some compression from LA2A. I've got some tape emulation from Ampex ATR, and then some reverb. So with all of that, it sounds like this. And that may sound like too much reverb, but in the mix, I don't think it's going to be. To me, that's just like the perfect Deftones snare, mix of like old school and new. Love it. And also with the kick, here it is raw. But then I'm cutting all that boxy mid-range, boosting a bit of slap, and then enhancing the low end with R bass. They have a huge bassy kick on like every album, so just making sure it has that thump we need. So let's lay down a beat, and usually I fly through the drum programming, but this video is going to be different because Abe has such a live feel to his drumming, so human sounding, and that's such an important part of Deftones, so I want to make sure we take our time and pay full respect to that. So we'll have this guitar intro, and then the drums will kick in. Maybe we have a quick little lead in just before. Okay, maybe we almost do like a My Own Summer. Let's try like close the hi-hat. Okay, let's try that. Yeah, I love that. Okay, so for the beat, we'll start with just a kick and a snare. I love that snare. And start with like an open hat, and then maybe we like alternate. You know, maybe we go really quiet for the middle ones just to you know, thinking like Abe, and then let's just like really humanize these more than I usually would. And maybe a little ghost note here. Maybe like dun dun. Maybe like a couple of double strokes right here. And then another ghost note. Yeah, that sounds like Deftones. So I'm really trying to think like Abe here in, you know, how I've laid out the kicks. So it's not just like a straightforward pattern. It's like just where I think he would put them. Same with the snares and the ghost notes. Like how would he add that feel to the snare? And even with these hi-hats, look how much I've humanized them. This is not something I usually do, but I'm just thinking if I was listening to this and it was a Deftones song, how hard would each one of these hits be? I've listened to a lot of Deftones in my life, so hopefully this is kind of how he would play. Alright, so just before we put a bass guitar line under this, I want to quickly add some more guitar effects in the right channel. So I'm starting with this free Audio Assault Prestige amp, which is modeled on a Plexi. Just sounds like a Marshall. But then I'm going to add this chorus effect in front of the amp so it sounds like this. And after that, I'm using Aura for some reverb and Cubase's ping pong delay, so we get this. Very dreamy, very gore, very Saturday Night Wrist, I feel. So the key to that one is basically a crap ton of chorus into a medium gain amp into a crap ton of delay. Gives you that. So let's figure out something that adds a bit more of an atmosphere to that verse. Okay, let's try that. Again, super minimal. We're not adding that to add like a catchy melody. It's just there for the texture, just to do what it's doing in the mix. We're keeping it minimal, but just giving it that dreamy vibe on the right. So there's still not a lot going on overall. Okay, now we're ready for the bass guitar and then we can get heavy. Now, Deftones, the thing people overlook most about this band is the amazing bass lines going on all throughout their catalog. Chi and Sergio both had similar writing styles, I would say. Maybe Chi was a little more aggressive and raw and Sergio was a little more refined. But they're both amazing players, and that's because they really understood exactly what Deftones needs from the bass. They both knew how to lock in perfectly with whatever Abe was doing on the drums. They both had a great tone that wasn't too in your face, but just served the sound of the music. And they both were really good at writing unconventional parts that very, very rarely followed exactly what Stefan was doing on guitar. So let's figure out something that kind of complements the track but doesn't just follow what the guitars are doing. See, this is where we need to keep in mind the song is in major and we want to make sure that the bass doesn't add to like the happy major vibes. It needs to sound a little darker, so I'm thinking maybe I'll go to some lower notes here. Okay, that's something. Okay, that's the sound we're looking for. You hear how the bass keeps it nice and dark even though it's major? Keeps it a little ominous. Okay, so for this bass tone, we want to keep a couple of things in mind. Firstly, we want a lot more mid-range than most heavy bass tones. Deftones always have this really present, warm bass sound in their mixes. And secondly, we want some growly 90s kind of distortion. I really want to kind of get that Chi distortion sound from back in the day. So it's kind of distorted, but not to the level that we hear in metal today. So here's how we achieve that. So Chi was known for heavily using the Ampeg SVT, and I tried an Ampeg SVT plugin, but to me, it didn't sound super close. I actually found that I got closest using just the bass amp plugin in Cubase. So this is the iTech amp. I don't know what it's modeled on, but it sounds really good for like grungy 90s tones. We've got the gain pretty high, and then you can see I'm not really touching any of the mid-range or the bass, just rolling off some treble. So usually, you know, for modern metal, we'd be doing something like this with the low mids, but I want all of that fullness in this track, so we're leaving it like that. now we just need some distortion in front of the amp, and I know that Cheese sometimes used a Sansamp preamp, so I'm going to use a Sansamp bass driver clone by Modern Music Solutions. So that's going to take our tone from this to this. When we get to the chorus, I'm going to add some different distortion and make it a bit more of a Sergio era bass tone, but for the verse, that's perfect. And just before we get to the chorus, I want to give Frank a little bit more of a spotlight in the verse. We did already add this guy, but I feel like in a verse like this, we'd get some of those pads, those big chords that we get from Frank. So I have this sound I put together in Vital. I'm actually going to just, make the attack a little smoother. To me, that is like the Deftones sound. So it's similar to the sound before. We have the noise in there. We have the pulse width modulation. And I'm blending a sine with a triangle wave. So it's mostly a smooth sound, filtering out that top end, and then just, the chorus, delay, reverb, just the things to make it sound nice and full. And the pulse width modulation is what gives it that kind of whooshy sound. It would be very static if we didn't have that, but you can see the waves are kind of moving around. So that means the synth is like constantly moving, which is a very Deftones thing. So again, keeping it minimal, we'll just lay down a couple of chords just so that this texture is in there, adding that dreamy vibe. And I'm going to go for the suspended chords here, like root 5th, 9th, things like that, because it's such a huge part of the Deftones sound. You know how their music doesn't really sound fully major or minor? It really sounds like it's floating in this suspended state. Well, a huge part of that vibe comes from the suspended chords. They're not really major or minor, so your brain can't place it, and it just sounds like it's kind of floating in this random place. So that's what we need. Let's lay it down, and then our verse is done. So coming to the chorus, let's start things off with the drums again, and I'm going to open up the crashes here. We've kept it nice and chill in the verses, so this is going to hit hard. So again, we'll start with a kick and a snare, and let's go for crash 1. So again, let's take all these crashes and give them that Abe feel. So I'm going to really turn down the middle ones so that they're almost not there. And then humanize these. There we go. Let's add a second crash as well as it drops, and maybe we have the snare there, like a quiet one here. Keep these going. Okay, let's add like a little kick before that snare. Really using the snare for the feel here. Okay, right at the end of the verse here, let's open up these hi-hats and like kind of swell the volume like that. All right, let's try this. Yes, that's the energy I'm looking for. Okay, maybe for the second half of the chorus, let's jump to the hi-hats. I feel like that's something that Abe would do. Like, he's never on one cymbal for too long, so we'll switch it to the hi-hats there. And for the kick and the snare, you can really see how I'm humanizing all of this, really making sure that I'm imagining Abe is playing this and just thinking, how's he gonna hit it? Like, he doesn't just play straightforward. It's usually something with a lot of feel, so making sure we have that rhythm. And even though it's getting busy, I'm making sure I'm still leaving some space. Space is such an important part of the sound. So, there are some fast double strokes here and there, but then there's little gaps like in the first hits here. It's kind of getting the right balance between busy and spacious. So let's try writing something. So I'm tuned down to F sharp standard, which is white pony tuning. So we have those super low genty notes if we want them. So maybe we'll try something kind of chuggy and low for the chorus. Or maybe we kind of continue the suspended chords, go a little more white pony. Let's try that. I think that might work. Okay, then we go low. Then we can kind of blend the old Deftones with new Deftones. Let's try that. Maybe we go to like some wrong notes here. This is the thing with Deftones. They do the beautiful stuff and then the brutal, ugly stuff. No one does it better than them. I think that might work if we kind of just go out of key with the low notes and just make it sound like super evil. Let's try it. And then let's like tie it back in. Okay, let's get it on the other side. Gotta have those low notes in there. I love how it starts off so beautiful. Another way that we're kind of messing with the major key. So it's like a very beautiful song, but if anyone was doubting whether it's Deftones, it's like that tells you it's Deftones. We're going totally out of key with that G note. But that's what Deftones do. So for this tone, I wanted to kind of blend the White Pony era tone with the diamondized Koino-Yokan tone. So I'm using the Archetype Nully plugin for this amp. If you wanted the full-on Koino-Yokan tone, then I would say like the Fortin Nameless plugin or the Mixwave Spirit Box plugin are really good for that. But I wanted a little bit of a blend of the old school and new school, so I feel like this one can do it best. However, I have turned off the cab in here. It's a great sounding cab, but I've put this after it instead, the Miko Reflex by ML Sound Lab, because it's just a bit more of a kind of clean, genty kind of sound, which is, to me, that's more Deftones. And I just found the presets in this plugin have like this really tidy low end and low mid range, which we need for this because we're making the bass so full in the low mids. We want to make sure the guitar stays out the way of this. So you could totally use the Cabin Archetype Nully. I just really like this plugin. So kind of blending guitar plugins there. And I'm also shaping it, especially in the mid range with some EQ. So here that is off and then on. Just really making sure it's crisp and genty and modern, but still has some of that White Pony vibe. And to just take that White Pony atmosphere a little bit further, I'm going to add some room reverb. I wouldn't usually do this on like a low chuggy metal tone, but in the mix, I think that's going to give us more of that Deftones vibe. Yeah, you don't really notice it, it just feels more atmospheric. So we have that same tone on the left and right, and I know I kept stressing how minimal and spacious we want the mix to be in the verse, but in the chorus is where we can kind of go all out with Deftones. It can just sound like this huge wall of sound. So I'm going to stack a few effects on top of that tone now. So we have this one I've put together, which is again just going to be like a soundscape rather than anything melodic. It's just going to be there for the texture. So let's use like some fourths so that it has that suspended vibe again, like a suspended fourth kind of sound. In the mix, that's only subtle, but these are the little tricks that give it that Deftones vibe where it just sounds huge. So this one, again, like the other effects track, is the Prestige amp with a bunch of delay and reverb after it, but in front of the amp, I've used the Big Goat, which is modeled on a Big Muff. And this insane distortion is what makes the difference. Like without this, it's just going to sound like The Cure or something. Still very Deftones, but for this huge chorus, we need that huge distortion. And again, I just want to make sure this doesn't get too happy sounding, like how we added this haunting synth. Let's do something like that to kind of give it that ominous feeling in the chorus. So I have this tone. which is the same thing, but I have soaked this in chorus, delay, and reverb, and it's like super atmospheric. So let's just try like some bends or something. Okay, let's try that. Again, only very subtle, but it totally transforms the chorus. And I'm kind of thinking like Frank there, even though I'm playing guitar, like that's definitely something he would add that just takes this chorus to another level. Okay, and again, for the bass guitar, I don't want to just follow the guitars. I want to do something more interesting, something that adds a little movement, because this is kind of a slow pace. The drums really have the energy here, so I want to try and match that with something on bass. Let's see what we can get. Okay, that's it. Let's do it. So I'm really just playing with the scale there while the guitars are just jamming out on those open chords. Like, we're kind of just letting the bass weave around those chords and find its own place. Alright, and for this tone, because I want to go for a bit more of a Sergio era tone, let's just add a bit more modern high mid-range grit. So I'm going to use Dark Glass Ultra, turn off the cab, so we're just using the pedal, and let's go nice and subtle. I love that extra bit of aggression. Let's see what that does as we go into the chorus. That's perfect. I want to keep it subtle. We don't want this to be like overwhelming distortion. We want to keep it in the background, but that just subtly steps up the aggression a bit in the chorus. All right, so there you go, guys. That's all my favorite Deftones tricks in one track. Super happy with how this one turned out. If you've enjoyed watching, please consider hitting the like and subscribe if you want more content like this. So we'll listen through the whole track in a second. Thank you so much for watching if you made it this far. And if you want the ultimate guide from me on production, mixing, and mastering, go check out my Modern Metal Pro course in the description. Let me know below what else you want to see on the channel, and I'll see you guys in the next one.